2. Break it off into 2 different radicals. You guys are familiar with perfect squares, I hope. Name a perfect square. 9, 36, 16, all right? 4, 9, 16, 30, oh, missing one. 25, 36, 49, so on, so on. Now, a lot of people, oh, you're a math teacher, so you memorize those. I don't memorize those. Here's the trick to getting them. Ready? 2 squared, 3 squared, 4 squared, 5 squared, 6 squared. That's how you get all the perfect squares. It's just squaring any number. All right, so I am looking for the biggest one of these that goes into 72 evenly. Not the first one you find, the biggest one that you find. All right, so go ahead, test out some of them right now. And again, it may not be the biggest one, the first one you find, but it's got to be the biggest one. Anybody hit the number? Where you got, Emma? 30. You guys may have found 9 does work, but it's not the biggest. 36 is. And Emma, what do you multiply 36 by? 2, yep. And here's the reason we have you pick a perfect square, so you can take the square root of it. Square root of 36. Okay, watch what I'm about to do here. It's 6. I see a lot of this sometimes. The number 6 and the square root of 6 are 2 totally different numbers. So it's just 6, and then I bring down the radical 2 along for the ride. Anything you want to talk about on that one? Okay, do the same thing for 32 now. I'm going to try to find the biggest perfect square, not the first one I find, but the biggest one. Anybody finding the biggest one? Mike? 16. What do you multiply in 16 by? Yep. All right, the square root of 16, 4, and then my square root of 2 comes along. Questions, comments, anything? All right, now, why am I having you do something like 3 and 4? Well, what's quadratic formula? All over 2a, right? All over 2a. So just get some practice dividing by. First thing, can I divide 48 and 2? Is that the number 48? It's the square root of 48. So the answer is no, I can't divide them. All right, I cannot divide them. But I can break down 48 into what? Find the biggest perfect square that goes into 48. Biggest perfect square should have been 16 times 3. Good job. And then I have square root of 16 is 4, so that should have broken down into 4 radical 3 all over 2. Now can you simplify anything? Where can I simplify? 4 and the 2, yep. They can simplify, and what's left when I reduce 4 and 2? Yep, so the 2's left on top, and there's my final answer, 2 square root of 3. Try it out, the next one. Can you divide 150 and 5? Well, you can, but not in this case because it's over a square root. So break down 150. Go ahead and break down 150. You guys, what perfect square went into it? 25. How many times? Times 6, yep. So you ended up with what? 5 radical 6 over 5. And those 5s do reduce. So you're just left with square root of 6. You can put a 1 out in front if you want, and that's fine. All right, we all good on breaking down the radicals? All right. On Friday, I asked you to factor, factor, factor. There's going to come a time now where you can't factor. So what do I do if I cannot factor anymore? And your response is, I have to rely on what's called the quadratic formula. Okay? Good news, you don't have to memorize it. Here's why. Do you guys remember when you took your algebra regents last year, you got a sheet of formulas? That's on there. It's the same sheet of formulas that's going to be on our geometry one in June. So that means because you'll get it in the regions, I'll give it to you on any test or quiz we have. Okay, so you do not have to memorize this. Do you know what it refers to as far as the A, the B, and the C value? We're okay there? All right, so let's try one out here. First thing, I don't know, is that a term familiar from last year? Roots? Find the roots. It's another name for the solutions, the answers. I don't know if any of your teachers used it last year, used that term, but that's what it's asking for. Find the roots, find the solution, solve for x. Okay, before we plug in, what's my A, B, and C value? Where's the A value located? Where's the A value located? In front of x squared. What's the number in front of x squared? 1. It's no x. It's not 1x squared. It's just the number in front of the variable. The B value is the number in front of the x, which ends up being 2. And the C value, which is called our constant, is the number with no variable, and that would be -1. All right? Everyone ready to plug in now? X equals, if I have negative B up here and my B value is 2, what's going to get plugged in here? Plus or minus? Everyone, please stop. I will never, in class, start actually plugging in numbers for the expression underneath the radical. Never. And I don't expect you to either. Go to your calculator. I showed this at the very beginning of the year. We have this little button above the on button called the store button. That's what I would like you to use to find the number that should go underneath the radical. Okay, so here's how we're going to do it. What's my A value in this problem? So I'm going to take 1, store it in for A, which is right above your math button. Everyone see A? So alpha math. So 1 stored in for A, and I'm just going to press enter, and it's stored in there. What value am I storing in for B? Okay, so 2 stored in for, everyone see where your B is, right above your apps button. Stored in for B. Got it. And what's my C value? -1, stored in for C, which is right above program. Got it. And what am I trying to find the value of? B squared minus 4AC. So that's exactly what I'll type into my calculator. B squared minus 4AC. And your calculator will plug those values in for you. You can never get it wrong. And the number underneath the radical is going to be 8. Done. Every year I see people don't want to use their store key. They'd rather say, oh, I'm Mr. Tough Guy and I don't want to use my store key. And they get something wrong because they can't handle plugging in the negative number and that minus sign. They can't handle it. Okay. All over 2 times. My A value was 1, so all over 2. No way am I going to allow you to leave it like that. This is why we did all the practice at the beginning of the day. Break down your radical first. So break down the square root of 8 first. Perfect square that goes into 8. That's the largest. 4 times 2. So the square root of 8 breaks down into square root of 4, which is 2, and then radical 2. Are we all right? Because this next point's pretty important. Now we can look to reduce. But hey, here's what you have to realize when you reduce now. You see the 2 in the denominator here. That applies to the left and the right side of that plus or minus. All right, so ready? What? Hey, negative 2 over 2. Negative 1. But that 2 in the denominator is not gone. Ready? It's still there. What can I reduce now on the right side of the plus or minus? The 2's. So I'm going to be left with negative 1 plus or minus. Those 2's reduce, and what's left over? Square root of 2. So again, the 2 in the denominator applied to the left and to the right side of that plus or minus. One final question for you before we move on. What was the highest exponent in the equation I was asked to solve? 2, and I showed you guys on Friday how many answers should you have then? 2. How do you get 2 answers from this then? So it's negative 1 plus radical 2 is your one answer, and the other one would be negative 1 minus radical 2. So that you do have 2 answers. Questions? Because that's all we're going to be doing today is using quadratic formula. Okay, let's see how you do on the next one now. Before we even start out A, B, and C, what do I need to do on this one? Well, I'm not going to factor it. It's still got to be equal to 0. Whether I'm going to factor it or use quadratic formula, it's still got to be equal to 0. And more importantly, put in the right order. Because if you don't put this in the right order, I have a feeling your B and your C value might get screwed up. So it'll be 3x squared minus 5x minus 1 equal to 0. Okay, here we go. A value. Yep, B and C. All right, here we go. So x equals, what's the negative B value then? If B is negative 5, what do I plug in for positive 5? Perfect. Plus or minus, again, I'm not going to show any work. I'm just going to go to my store key. And I'm going to store in the A, B, and C value right now. So get practice at it. Let's see if we can all come up with the same value for B squared minus 4AC. B squared minus 4AC. Are we getting a number out? What number are we getting? 3, negative 5, negative 1, store it. See, this is a problem, Emily. I'm not too familiar with the inspires. One second, guys. Okay, how about if I do? No, let me play around with it after I'm done here. Okay. And then for now, just take that. Okay. 37 underneath. Okay, all over 2 times 3. So what should have been in your denominator? 6. All right, now let's talk, because this is slightly different than the last one we did. Anybody try to break down 37? Can't happen, right? Okay, so it can happen. Can you reduce 5 over 6 at all? Can't even do that. So this is what you would leave as your final answer. Can't reduce the radical and can't reduce anything on the outside. So that's as far as I'm looking right now. It's as far as I can go. All right, let's keep it going here with the next one. Just so we make sure we're all on the right track here. What's your A value? 9, B value 4, and C value negative. Okay. Let's see what you got here. X equals -4 plus or minus something all over 18 on this one. Okay. Let's see if we can all come up with the same number underneath the radical. Yep.
Could you type like multiple, store multiple at one time before hitting enter? Or do you need to hit enter after you store every one?
So you mean store A and B on the same line?
Yeah.
I think you have to hit enter. What number did you get? You got a pretty large number, right? 592. Okay, let's talk right now. With a number so large, I would check first if you could take the square root of it. All right, instead of trying to break it down right away, I would just say, hey, can I take the square root of 592? And doesn't look like I can. All right, so now, okay, I can't take the square root of it, so let me try breaking it down now. And don't be intimidated by it. Don't be intimidated. So start with your numbers, 4, 9, 16. We got the right A, B, C's. 9, 4, -16. Oh, that's, here you go. See what you typed in, B minus 4AC. B squared, right?
Oh.
Right?
Okay.
And what are you guys finding? What perfect square does go into it? 16 and? Oh, everyone just drop what you're doing right now for a second. Quick focus. I know some of you may be concerned, how do I know there's not a bigger one other than 16? And here's how you can tell. Look at the other number. Is there a perfect square that goes into the other number? If there isn't, you pick the biggest one. Okay? If this number was something that a perfect square went into, you didn't pick the biggest perfect square to begin with. Okay, so nothing goes into 37, so I know I picked the biggest one. So help me out. What's that going to be? 4, -4 plus or minus 4 square root of 37 over. Okay, here we go. I can definitely reduce 4 and 18. Remember, here we go. -4 over 18. What would that reduce down to? -2 over 9. Yep. And then the same thing can be done over here. 2 over 9. Anything from you guys? Not too bad. And then I think there's one more, right? For you guys to try out on your own before I let you. Oh, two more. Sorry. Anybody want to help me distribute number 4? 2x times 3x. 6x squared equals 2x plus 3. What's the problem? Got to equal to 0, yep. I always like to keep the a values positive, so I'm going to bring over the 2x by subtracting and bring over the 3 by subtracting. A 6, B is -2, C is -3. Depends what the number underneath the radical turns out to be. What are you guys finding? 76. Here's how you can tell real quick, Cameron, and is that if the number underneath the radical is a perfect square, you can factor it. But if it's not, like everyone's getting 76 out, is that a perfect square? No, so I have to use quadratic formula. Okay, 76, yeah, 76. Can you break down 76? Anybody finding a perfect square that goes in the 76? 4 and... Okay, again, this is what I talked about earlier. I know nothing goes into 19. So I know 4 has got to be the biggest one, all right? So what do you have? 2 plus or minus 2 radical 19 over 12. Can you reduce any more? Yep. 2 over 12. 1, right? Over 6 plus or minus 1 radical 19 over 6. And you don't have to have that 1 in front of the radical 19. But are we doing all right with this? Because I want to do this next one with you. All right, go ahead. Move the 15 over. And we know what our A, B, and C values are by now. Anybody coming up with the number underneath the radical? $1.21. I'll make sure we're all at this point here because then this is something different we haven't seen yet. So I got 1 plus or minus the square root of 121 over 4. We're all right? Anybody know anything about 121? It's a perfect square. So I wouldn't, don't break it down. If it's already a perfect square, find it. Square root of 121 is what? 11. So I'm just, look, 11. Don't break it down. It's already a perfect square. All over 4. And then how do I get 2 answers from this point? Ready? X equals, how do I find one answer? 1 plus 11 divided by 4. And what's the other answer? 1 minus 11 over 4. So if it's a perfect square, don't bother breaking it down. You're just going to confuse yourself. If it's a perfect square underneath there, find it. Okay, find it. So what are my two answers here? 1 plus 11 divided by 4 is 3. And I think I get a decimal here, right? Negative 10 divided by 4 is what? Negative 2.5? 2.5? Yep. So there are my two answers here. Okay, so sometimes you won't be left with the radical. Go ahead, Justin.
Do you want like negative 2.5 or can I have it negative 5 over 2?
Oh, I'm fine with that. That's fine. Just as long as you don't leave it like this. Okay. Other questions, comments? Okay, just like on Friday, it looks like you're going to have plenty of time to start this. I just beg that you check your answers on Aspen sometime before tomorrow's class.